Let's learn about conditional statements. So, conditional statements allow us to change the flow of the program. Let me explain. We already know that whenever we run our programs, statements get executed from top to bottom, and we can breakpoint them, see them at the current state. But with flow of control statements, we can change that flow. Now, there are three types of flow of control statements. There's conditional, looping, and branching. In this video, I will be going over conditional statements. Let me show you an example. I will go ahead and take an input from a user. We already know how to do that. And I will say console, read line, and get the input from a user. Now, I will check if the input equals a certain value. In this case, I will say Avitas, which is my name. And then I will print out, based on that condition being satisfied or not, I will say hello admin. Way too many L's there. So now I will say if the input is not Avitas, so I will say else if input equals to Joe, then I will print hello moderator. Now let's put an exclamation mark here. Then I will say else print out saying hello guest. So let me go over this. First, if, else if, and else are all reserved keywords in this case. Or in other words, if and else are reserved keywords, and we'll put them in different combination here. So then what you need for a conditional statement is a Boolean expression, which is what we have right here. So you have if, which is a reserved keyword, then you have parentheses, and within parentheses you have your Boolean expression. The Boolean expression is a type of expression that a value is down to a Boolean value. And what is a Boolean value? It is either true or false. So in theory, we can just have true or false here, and it will still work. But that's very redundant, so that's why we have an expression that a value is down to a value. Then we check that value. And the reason why this is flow of control statement is because sometimes some of these statements won't be executed. So the flow will change based on these conditions, right? And also one thing to notice is that I can take these out, and this will work just fine. The reason why I have this is because I want to extend my condition. And the way you extend it is by saying else if or else for a default case. So also, I could have another condition here. So you can have as many else ifs as you want if your condition is large enough. But in this case, I don't need that, so I will take it out. So there's another type of conditional statement called switch statement. Let me go ahead and write a switch statement that is identical to the if statement we have above. I will go ahead and say switch input, then we have curly braces. We'll say case Avitas. Then we want to print hello admin. And then I will say break. After, I will just copy this because it's going to be very similar to Joe. And the only difference is that we want to say hello moderator. Then I will say default. We want to print hello guest and then break again. Great. So this switch statement is identical to the one above, which is doing the same exact thing. It's just checking for the input to be Avitas, doing something for it, checking for the input to be Joe, otherwise doing something else, and then it has a default case. This just looks different, but it still does the same exact thing. So let's go over the format. Switch, once again, is a reserved keyword. Case is a reserved keyword, and a break is a reserved keyword. So switch, you have the body of switch within the curly braces, and you are passing in an input, which is our input, and this is some type of value. And then you're checking a range of possibilities for that value. And the way you're doing that is by using the reserved keyword case. And you're saying, hey, is input Avitas, right? So case is going to match whatever the value is in the input. So it says, is it Avitas? Is it Joe? No? Okay, well then I'm going to go with the default case. And if it is something, then we perform an action for that case and we break. And break pretty much skips over the rest and just goes on with the rest of the execution flow. Now, a good question would be, what is the difference between the two? And when do you want to use one over the other? Very good question. The answer is that whenever you have one value and you want to check that against the range of possibilities, just the way we have it here, then you want to go with switch, because switch has a very simple format and it's easier to read and understand. So is if, but switch is used for that case when you have one value and you want to check it against a rest of possibilities that you specify in the body. If statement can do the same, but it can do a lot more. Because when you introduce other variables, if statement can work with that, but a switch statement can work with more than one variable. In this case, we have input. But if we have another input, we won't be able to do it with switch. We have to go and do it with an if statement. Let me show you an example. Let's actually change input to username, just for readability's sake. And you can do this by doing Control RR. So if you do Control RR, it will highlight all the inputs, and then you can just simply rename that to whatever you want. In this case, I will say username, and then you press enter, and that's it. So it's a pretty nifty shortcut. Then I will say string password, and I will say console readline, and I will get the password, right? And then I will say and password equals to, let's say, a very simple password, ABC123, the classic. Then I will say, if it's Joe and the password equals to ABC124, then we're going to say hello moderator. Otherwise, if it's Avitas but the password is wrong, or it's Joe but the password is wrong, or anything that doesn't satisfy this condition, then we're going to say hello guest. So we wouldn't be able to do the same thing with switch, because switch doesn't work with two variables, at least currently. We could do it with switch, but we had to make a workaround. And why have a workaround if we can just do it with an if statement? So once again, the difference is that if you have a value and want to check it against a range of possibilities, then use switch. Otherwise, use if you need more than one variable. And so one more thing to clarify, this is not how you do authentication. The reason why I made it like this is just to show you how conditional statements work. And this was just a great example to use a username and a password, because username is one variable. So it shows that if and switch can work the same, but when you add another variable, which is password, then the difference is shown very quickly, because one can't handle what the other one can. In this case, multiple variables. So let's actually go ahead and run this. I will say breakpoint here, and then you can see that it's waiting for an input, and I will say Avitas, and I will say ABC123. You can see that this will, see, print hello admin, because the condition was satisfied. There you go. But if I try to run it and I say Avitas and I say ABC125, that won't work because the condition won't be satisfied, and this will also be not satisfied. And then it will just go and say hello guest. See that? There you go. So that's it. And before I leave, I just wanted to also go over this one quick thing that I didn't explain to you. This is another operator that you can simply find in the form that I showed you in the MSDN form in Microsoft. This is a Boolean operator that stands for AND, and it takes two operands, one on the right side and one on the left side. The operands are Boolean expressions that evaluate to a Boolean value. So it basically says that if the expression on the right side evaluates to true and the expression on the left side evaluates to true, then the whole thing will evaluate to true. But if at least one of them is false, the entire thing will be false. And that's why I used and. There's another one which is called or. And this operator just says if at least one of the expressions, Boolean expressions, evaluates down to true, then the whole thing will be true. If at least one of them is false, it doesn't matter. As long as one of them is true, the whole thing will be true. But in this case, we don't need that, because if we say or, then as long as we put the username correctly, the password might be incorrect and it will still say hello admin. So we want to say and. And I just wanted to clarify that real quickly.